Okay, there we go. Welcome, welcome everyone. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take out one of my ears because otherwise I'm hearing myself. You're hearing yourself. Sorry. So I am Jules and I am a regular coach here at COA. And this is Steve, my dad, who a lot of you absolutely adore and ask for him to come back. So here we are to commemorate World Mental Health Day with our tools for your mental health toolbox. So there's a little bit of information about us there on that first slide for you. And then what I'm going to share in the chat box is just some links. So it's already got in here the COA's Instagram, which I know Paola has already covered off. But if you are new to my sessions, there is a link at the very top of that. And that's the link to receive all the handouts. So if you register for that link at the end of this session, you'll receive every single handout, including tonight's. I've been proactive and got it all uploaded early for once. And then you've also got there a link for tomorrow's event, which I will talk you through in a moment. You've got my contact information and social media there as well. But without further ado, I think it's time to get started. Okay, so as Paola mentioned, Sunday is World Mental Health Day. Now, the theme for this year is mental health in an unequal world. And what is really interesting is that the World Federation for Mental Health, who sets this theme, have highlighted that there's still a rich-poor divide. Now, this is interestingly seen mostly in low to middle income countries, where up to 95% of people are not receiving the access they need for mental health disorders. We're also here in the UK, we have long waiting lists. We still have a rich-poor divide to a degree in the more high-income countries. And then we also have some quite shocking race differences, which has been brought to light recently with Mental Health First Aid England's Race Impact Report 2021. So just to call out one of those stats, Black people are 4 times more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act here in the UK. We've also found through this report that ethnic discrimination in the workplace costs the UK economy £40 billion a year. So there's a lot of work still to be done, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So we are going to launch straight into it with our first tip.
We not got the connectivity thing.
Oh, we have. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. There you go. I'm getting stalled, everybody. We do have another event tomorrow, which we just want to tell you a tiny bit about before we give you our top 10 tips. So tomorrow from 6 p.m, we have a live stream, which is going to come over something called Vimeo. So it's like watching TV. It's no more than 90 minutes. And it's kind of like mini TED Talks. So Steve, you're going to be talking about connections, aren't you?
I am, yes.
So he's going to go in a lot more detail on what he might mention about today. And there's going to be somebody called Luke Adebayi, who's going to be here to talk about the importance of diversity in the workplace. And then I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is simple self-care. So the link is in the chat box for you to be able to register and come along and watch that session for free. Now we're going to get in it with our top 10 tips. So as Paola mentioned, we are going to save some time at the end for a Q&A, and she'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. So feel free to pop some questions in the chat box throughout, and we're going to present for you now.
Okay, so I think I'm first with tip number 1. There's a very nice picture there of Jules, and I can confess that I am the individual inside that snowman. We were raising money for, I think it was for the hospice,
yeah,
quite a few years ago. I had to put a lot of weight on to fit into the snowman outfit, and I still haven't lost it, but never mind. So healthy attachments, really important in terms of our emotional welfare system. We need to have connections, they need to be safe. We need to be in relationships where there is clear and open communication. And one of the difficulties is that the pandemic has reduced the physical availability of connections. And if you just think of simply in the workplace, many people aren't at work, many people are working from home, and it might just have been that you'd gone to the coffee machine to make a coffee. Those kind of things aren't happening anymore. And what we're finding is that people are struggling because they've lost so much emotional exchange and support on a daily basis. So what can happen is people can start to feel detached. And when people feel detached, they can experience anxiety, low mood that can lead to depression, failed relationships. In extreme situations, sometimes people become violent because they can't deal with the emotions that they're actually left with. And also people can develop addictions as well. So connecting is really important. That could be just using technology like we're doing today. Many people have found, various platforms helpful in maintaining contacts with people all over the world. We might just decide to volunteer once a week. And that kind of gives us a sense of feeling good because we're actually giving something back to the community. We might join some sort of team. It could be a darts team, it could be a soccer team. You notice I use the American word.
You're getting good at this stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to be, cover the whole world. Sorry?
You're being inclusive.
I'm being inclusive, I am, yeah. In the UK, we often talk about non-vocational courses. These don't involve exams, but you would learn a new skill, something very similar to decorating cakes. Ensure you do have supportive friends around you, and if possible, join some kind of community group. Unfortunately, the pandemic has put this on ice at the moment here on the island, but we have a group of people and they call them active souls. And they tend to be maturer people like me. But in essence, what they do is kind of physical education games that you would do when you're at school. So it's fun. It's kind of like Tiggy or tag. So it's really important to develop some kind of community sense and make sure we have positive connections in our life.
And then tip number 2, shock horror, it is mindfulness. So this is one of my favorite things to do. I personally attribute mindfulness to helping me heal about 4 or 5 years ago when I had quite extreme anxiety, and it really helped me to kind of find my way back from where I was. Now, interestingly, some people believe that mindfulness is just meditation or relaxation. That's not quite what it is. Mindfulness is about being in the present moment, the here and now, and essentially it's about observing without judgment. Too often we're thinking about the future and what we need to do tomorrow, or we're reflecting on the past and that thing that we said to our neighbour, and perhaps we're a bit worried that it might not have come across the way that we'd intended. We're spending less and less time in this present moment. And that's what mindfulness brings back. That's why I love the quote, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf," which comes from John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the Western fathers of mindfulness in the States. So it's not just about meditation. You can practice mindfulness in many ways. There's mindful drawing, gardening, walking. We're actually going to do a little exercise right now before I finish explaining it. So I kind of feel like doing sometimes helps you know what it is.
Yeah.
So what I would like you all to do is look around you right now in your room and call out 5 things that you can see. So looking around, 5 things that you can see. So acknowledge each one. And remember, we're doing this without judgment. So just picking those 5 things. And then I want you to reach out and touch 4 things. So 4 things around you. So just touching them. It could be a notepad. I'm going to touch my microphone. And then I want you to tune in to your hearing. What 3 things can you hear right now? Granted, I'm going to be one. But what else can you hear in the room? What about outside the room? Once you picked 3 things, I'd like you to then focus on your sense of smell. Too often we get used to the smells around us, but really tune in and see, what can you smell? Can you perhaps smell the meal that you cooked earlier? Maybe a candle that's burning in the background. And then once you've picked 2 things you can smell, I'd like you to tune into your sense of taste. What can you taste right now in your mouth? And that's one of our simple mindfulness exercises. Now, mindfulness also comes as a form of therapy, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's also a CBT version as well now. So what can happen is you can have blended therapy with the meditations, with exercises and journaling, or perhaps you can use mindfulness for simple activities to spend time in the moment. I'm going to touch on some of these a little bit later on one of my other tips.
Okay, so tip number 3, transactional analysis. It's a model of therapy. It's a model to understand how human beings communicate. And it's also a model to understand how we develop from children into adults. And one of the theories is about a thing we call positive strokes. Positive strokes are any unit of recognition that either recognizes yourself, another person, or the situation.
So it's not me just doing that then?
That could be a positive stroke, yeah, because often touch is important. It's good for connecting. It could be that you have just decorated your lounge and you finished decorating, you stand back and you think, what a great job I've done. Someone might say to you, I love you being my friend. They don't qualify why. It's just an unconditional stroke. We have a hunger for these strokes. We need these strokes. If we don't get positive strokes, we will get negative strokes, or we will look for negative strokes. So what are the difficulties with the pandemic and frequent lockdowns is that we've all developed a system of gaining positive or negative strokes, and it's called time structuring. And the simplest way to engage in strokes is simply to withdraw, daydream. You might dream about becoming the next president of the United States of America. You might dream about winning the lottery. You might dream about becoming famous. You might just dream about winning some money and setting up an animal sanctuary. It's very safe. It only involves yourself, but there is an element of pleasure when we place ourselves in that place where we're daydreaming. However, most of us look for strokes by engaging with other people. The simplest way we do that is through rituals. So a ritual would be every time we go into a workplace and we actually acknowledge our colleagues, we say good morning. We might wave at neighbours. We might just politely pull up at a zebra or pedestrian crossing and just wave at the person as they go across past our car. However, a next level would be to engage in what we call pastiming. This is where we talk about safe subjects. So it might be about a recent election and the results. We might talk about children. We might talk about soccer teams, football teams, netball teams, basketball teams, the current results. What else could we talk about?
Marvel What If, the final was yesterday.
Yes, yeah, we could
Good
talk
final.
about that. Music.
Yeah.
Often television programs. So if you're watching a series and you might go in and say, did you see the episode last night? People might say, yeah, no, I didn't. No, don't tell me because I've recorded it. So we kind of engage in these safe subjects. The most rewarding way to get positive strokes is to be active and engaging with someone. That could be solving problems at work, being considerate, sitting and listening with someone while they're telling you about difficulties that they're encountering. It could be that we are playing for a local sports team or a darts team or whatever it is. But anything that involves in activities between 2 or more people, you will find there will be lots of positive strokes. So we kind of get strokes from doing this.
We love it.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be that complicated. But because of the lockdowns, it has limited the amount of strokes people can get. So we have to be mindful of trying to find them in other ways.
Tip number 4, which I touched on when I spoke about mindfulness, is to journal. Journaling really is simple to do. And from my experience of teaching it, I think that is something that actually causes a bit of a barrier for people. They want a set of rules, but there really are no rules. The best way I can say is to write without judgment, let it flow, ignore your spelling, your grammar, your sentence structure. Maybe use a journal that you can hide somewhere or a password protected document, and choose what's right for you. Journaling has grown in recent years and there are so many different types. You can have guided journals that are maybe in depth. You can have daily journals, which might take 7 minutes a day. You could have subject journals, such as gratitude journals, that ask you for 3 things you're grateful for. There's bullet journaling as well, or simply a really nice notepad that you just free flow write in. The benefits of journaling are huge, and unfortunately we only have about 2 minutes per slide, so we can't go through that major list. But just to call out a few, there are health benefits. It can improve chronic illnesses, it can reduce your GP visits, it can improve your relationship with your mind, it provides more clarity, it helps increase a positive mindset, it can increase gratitude, it can help you to manage your stress better, it can reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression, it is mindful in itself, especially when you're in the moment, and it can also help improve performance in sports, studying, and also there have been studies that have linked into work. So if you've had a period of absence, it can help you return to work quicker, perhaps after redundancy, and it can also help you manage work-related stress. Now, we've had a direct question. Okay, instead of journaling, what about sharing your views and frustrations with your best friends or partner? Well, that kind of links into transactional analysis, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's down to doing what you feel is the most comfortable for you.
Yeah. And we don't expect you to do all 10 tips, by the way. You might hear a tip and go, no, Jules, that's not for me. It's okay. That's all right. Pick what's right for you.
Sounds like journaling is a bit like Disney's Frozen. Let it flow, let it flow. Yeah.
You see what I have to live with.
Back to myself. Tip number 5. Don't allow yourself to be continually criticised internally. What we have to learn to be is to become our own best friend. So what I mean by that is to treat ourselves the way we would treat one of our friends if they were having struggles or difficulties. We sometimes get into this over beating ourselves up in our head. I know Jill sometimes talks about self-soothing. That's us using our nurturing parent, which is part of our personality, in a nice way. So it's giving us permissions. It's telling us things are going to be okay, not to worry about things. What we need to avoid doing is being overly critical and allowing our critical, controlling parent to basically tell us off all the time. So if you're hearing words like should, ought to, must, it's just a case of saying to yourself, hang on, who's telling me that I must, I ought, or I should be doing those things? And just allowing ourselves to step out of that process for a moment and thinking about the opposite and giving ourselves permissions to actually be okay with ourselves. So we need to learn to speak to ourselves as if we're our own best friend.
Do you know what my controlling parent's called?
Go.
Regina George from Mean Girls.
Ah, clever.
Yeah, she's also my inner critic. There are words for different things across psychology, aren't there? But
Yeah.
a lot of them they do overlap. By the way, someone said they love you.
Oh, thank you. Must be my singing.
Tip number 6. Again, no shock here. It is self-care. As some of you probably know, because I've seen a lot of regular faces on this session, I don't like to complicate things. I like to keep it simple. Please don't start singing, Dad.
I'm not going to start singing.
So there's a well-known saying, which is you can't give or drink from an empty cup. And it is so true. Self-care is checking with yourself and knowing what you need in each day, each moment. With self-care, it's not selfish. In some cases, it's a form of self-discipline. It's going to bed that extra hour early and not binging that Netflix series that you can't wait to finish. It's maybe saying no to that extra drink. It's all about preserving our own physical and internal well-being. Because after all, your longest relationship in life is with yourself. Now, the way that I suggest people practice self-care is through happiness hours. They're very easy to do. You simply take an hour, remove the to-do list, be a human being and not a human doing, and do something that you enjoy. It could be gardening, it could be singing,
Could be.
It could be drawing, journaling, so you can see how a lot of these are now overlapping. It's picking that one thing and doing it in the moment and enjoying the experience instead of thinking about what you need to do next. For me, it's baking. I love to put some music on when I've got a good few hours, bake a batch of brownies, really enjoy the process. But if I've been asked to bake a batch of brownies and didn't have much time, I'd probably be thinking about what I needed to do next. Often it's the intention. It's the way we approach these activities that make it self-care.
And you are a very good baker.
Thank you. We've had a very interesting comment here from Kat Kelly, who always tries to find 2 positives, one negative. And I think that's quite interesting because in positive psychology, they've found it's 3 to 1. So you should have 3 positive interactions to every 1 negative.
Yeah. The thing to remember is if you've had lots of really good positive interactions with people, but then you have a really horrible one, it can kind of wipe a lot of them out. You know, it's almost like you've been depleted of strokes. Yeah. So the more positives you can get, the better it is for our positive mental health. So tip number 7, grow yourself. That doesn't mean that you have to sleep in a grow bag or use fertilizer in your kind of bedding. What we mean is as a person, give yourself challenges, set simple goals that are achievable. Learn to explore your passions. Learn something new, a new skill. Be curious about the world. Start to notice more things. Really important is self-awareness. The more self-awareness that we can generate and the things we can learn about ourselves, we will become more effective communicators and we will become more resilient and be able to deal with some of the stresses of life. A good thing, self-help books. If you're interested in learning about yourself and developing self-awareness, there are two very good transaction analysis books. One is called Born to Win, and the other one is TA Today.
Come right behind you.
Yes, I've already converted Jules. Now, just to put it out there, I do not get any money for every other time these books are sold. But I do know that I have used them for many years, and people find them very readable, because TA is written in a way that you can kind of understand yourself. Here's Jules now demonstrating the books.
Yep.
And doing this kind of thing that we're doing tonight, an absolute excellent way, you know, doing these kind of online courses to actually grow yourself.
And it's all free.
Yep.
It's great.
Absolutely brilliant.
It is amazing. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions there. I'm going to say to Deborah to post your question at the end, and I'm going to type the books in the chat box at the end as well for you. And tip 6 was self-care, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very welcome. Okay, tip number 8. Consider your consumption, and not of alcohol and sugar. I mean, that will help. But have you ever thought about what you surround yourself with? So someone just mentioned in the chat box there about listening to audiobooks. But if you're listening to trashy podcasts that stress you out, or music that is full of derogatory language and swear words, that can have a detrimental effect. Consider the TV that you watch. Now, I know we all have our guilty pleasures, but if you are constantly consuming drama-filled programs that are stressful and that can spike your cortisol, it is going to have an impact on you. I actually heard about this from a guy called Rob Dial, the Mindset Mentor, and he did a podcast on it, and it stayed with me ever since I heard it. Think about the media you consume. Now, I know you watch the news first thing, don't you?
Normally, yeah.
But for me, it stresses me out. I will read the news halfway through the day. I won't look at my phone for the first 20, 30 minutes, because it's proven that looking at social media first thing spikes your cortisol. Think about your social media as well. Who are you following? Comparisonitis is a thing. We live in a world where marketers are trying to sell us things. They're trying to tell us that we can have it all, that we should, notice that dirty word of should, keep up with the Joneses, that we need that nice car, that we need to be married, that we need to have children, that we need the job and the side hustle and the body, and I'm bored just listing it. If you're following people on social media that trigger those fears, it's not going to be a healthy or an enjoyable experience of scrolling through your newsfeed, but you can cultivate it. I get it that some people don't want to unfollow others, but you can mute them, especially on Facebook and Instagram. You can cultivate your social media feed with people who inspire you. So think about what you're consuming, mindfully check in with how you feel, and notice. I know my guilty pleasure is Grey's Anatomy. If I watch too much of it, I have crazy dreams. So I know that I need to limit it before bedtime. So that's a little challenge from me to you, is to consider your consumption.
Very good. We're getting some great, interesting comments as well.
Yeah.
Tip number 9, sources of support. What it's really important to acknowledge is that sometimes we do need that professional help. However, before you get professional help, think about supportive friends. I think we had that before, didn't we? We were saying talking with others might initially help. Social groups. So it might be trying to think, walk and talk groups. That, you know, because then you're getting some exercise and you're talking and getting support. You may work in an organisation that has mental health first aiders. So they have got some training in knowing how to listen and how to respond to people whose positive mental health has started to deteriorate. You may need to go to your doctor, we call them general practitioners, or a primary healthcare professional. You might also need to think about, do I need some therapy? And it doesn't always have to be traditional therapy. There are many alternative methods, things like acupuncture. What else? Would you say?
Oh, there's the tapping thing.
Yeah.
Is it EMDR? That's
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
want.
So think about, for me, therapy is like shopping. You need to shop around and decide what you feel comfortable with.
Mm.
Sometimes we need specialists, what we call secondary healthcare or mental health care. So we would be looking at mental health professionals, like somebody like myself. However, not everybody needs to go to that level of support. Self-help books as well can also sometimes help. Think about what you need. You know, what is going to actually fix what you think is wrong in your life. And it might be that you don't need mental health services. You may need a bereavement counsellor. You might need to go to some kind of relationship coach or counsellor. So think about what you need. It's a bit like shopping when it comes to therapy. Make sure you get the right fit.
I think this is a good point as well to mention stigmas and things like that, because I think some people are scared to go and reach out for sources of support because of the stigma there. So what would you say to somebody who was a bit like, oh, I couldn't do therapy, or then maybe they felt like they were a failure in reaching out for a source of therapy?
Yeah, I would say give it a go, because you're not going to be a failure. And if you get the right kind of therapist, and sometimes you might need to not take the first therapist that you get, because we can get personality clashes.
Yeah.
Or somebody might remind you of one of your teachers from the past, and then that causes some kind of historic kind of feelings which are uncomfortable to deal with. But normally we can find a counsellor who is the right fit and who uses the right therapeutic model, because there are lots of different therapeutic models out there. Basically, we're all saying the same thing, but just using different words.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, there is still a stigma out there, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with looking for support and, you know, healing yourself. As I said on the self-care, this is another form of self-care. It's connect to yourself, isn't it?
It should be no different to getting help and support for physical problems.
Yeah, definitely. So tip number 10, and then we will answer some of those questions in the chat box, is to move and exercise. There are so many studies out there that prove that exercise does help on mental health. It reduces anxiety and depression, and it helps to reduce negative moods, while also boosting our self-esteem and releasing feel-good hormones like dopamine and serotonin. Now, a little caveat from me is, if you're feeling highly anxious and perhaps you run on adrenaline and you have a stressful role, going for a run might not release what you need to release. Listen to your body. Sometimes a relaxing yoga class is what is needed to ground you. Other times, perhaps you need an energy boost, so a 20-minute HIIT class, like we've got here on COA, might be that energy boost that you need. Pick what you enjoy and what you need. So this is balancing that self-care and self-discipline. Self-care is, I'm going to move, I'm going to exercise. Self-discipline is, don't really like doing cardio, but I will do it a couple of times a week. Find that balance that is right for you. Now, we also do need to include 2 weight bearing a week. So that could be a bar class. It could be going to the gym. We need to listen to our body and listen to our injuries as well. Now, the NHS does recommend, so that's here in the UK, 150 minutes of moderate exercise per week, and or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise, which would be split out over 4 to 5 days. Now, recent studies do suggest that you can move and exercise every day, provided it's not intense. So think about your RPE scale of 1 to 10. 1 is I'm barely moving. 10 is I can only sustain this for 30 seconds. If you're doing something in that middle ground each day, you're fine. If you're varying what you're doing, you are fine to move each day. I also want you to consider something called NEAT, which is non-exercise, oh, I can never remember this, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I just call it NEAT all the time.
It's easier.
It is, isn't it? And it's neat. You have sleeping and eating, and then you have exercise. This space in the middle, that's your NEAT. That's hanging up the washing. That's going to do the food shopping instead of ordering it online. It's walking the dog. It's doing your cleaning. It's hoovering. It's brushing things up. It's moving your body. It's that 5-minute desk stretch that you do on the break that you know you need to take, that you know your body needs. A good way of boosting your NEAT is also to track your steps. So that's another way that's just super easy. Pick a step count that's maybe a little bit more than what you would do and try to increase your activity that way. And plan the time in your diary. So I can see we've had a few comments here. So what I'm going to do is...
Can I just mention one quick thing?
Can.
Sometimes what gets in the way of us exercising when we need to, particularly if we have been signed off work sick, is that we worry about going out and being seen strolling through the park or joining an exercise class when everybody else is in the workplace, perhaps doing some of our work. But that's back to the idea of you self-soothing and using that supportive, nurturing parent to say, I need to do this, this is okay.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. Because I've even had clients in the past when I've worked in gyms and studios who have cancer and they come along to the yoga sessions. They're signed off work, but they know that that yoga session would nourish them. They know that that gym workout is going to be good for their recovery.
It's back to stigmas getting in the way.
Yeah, we will smash them one day.
Definitely.
Okay, so we have got a request there from Carrie first. So Paola, could you go over the information about the giveaway again for us? While you're doing that, we're just going to go back through and have a look to see some of the questions.
You got the questions?
So I'll talk about it a little bit more. But basically, we're having a giveaway that we are launching this Sunday, so on the 10th for World Mental Health Day. And basically, we're going to put up a post. The requirements are that you follow Koa and Jules's Instagram, and that you like it and tag a friend in the comments. And the prize is a 3-pack session with Jules. So it's a one-on-one coaching and also a 1-year subscription to Headspace. So this is going to be running for about 5 days. We're opening it up on Sunday and we will be picking a winner on Friday. The winner will be picked completely at random. There's these programs now that you can connect to your Instagram and it does like a little wheel of fortune and chooses someone who left a comment. So yeah, I think that's it. But if anyone has any further questions on that, do let me know.
Because we never mentioned apps.
We didn't know. No, there are plenty of apps there. So with mindfulness, I think I assumed you all knew about meditations and I wanted to go the opposite way, but you do have things like Insight Timer and Headspace that provide you with talks and meditations that can really help with your mental health.
Appify is another good one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've had a few comments earlier on. So someone asked, does later always come or do you not always take care of yourself?
An interesting question.
It is. For me, it's easier to put something off. And sometimes it's easier to focus on the other people around you than to put yourself first. And I think that also links into a bit of self-esteem as well, doesn't it? Priorities.
Yeah, I guess it's easy to procrastinate. That's why they invented a snooze button on an alarm clock, because that's the ultimate procrastinating, just thinking I'll get up in 5, I'll get up in 5. But it's about being kind to yourself and thinking, okay, why does it never come? What could I do differently so that it's okay for it to come?
Yeah, definitely. There's a really interesting question from earlier from Deborah. Why do some people always think of others before themselves? What are your pros and cons to that?
Very possibly. One of the things that we are taught when we are very young is what we call driver behaviours. Driver behaviours are what are supposed to mediate stress and make us feel okay, and it kind of gives us a sense of good self-esteem. One of the most common ones is to please others. So basically, what we're being taught is we're only okay when we're pleasing others. And these tend to kick in almost on an unconscious level. So it's about realizing if we have got a please other driver and realizing I don't have to please others to be okay. I wasn't put on the planet to do that. I never signed a contract to say I'll always put other people first. So again, it's down to self-awareness and identifying if that might be a process that you experience.
Yeah. There's been a few questions as well about the handouts and things. So once I click off this, I'm going to give you the link to the NHS and then also how to register to receive the full PDF of these slides, which are already linked to an automated email that you will receive. And for those who are already registered to receive the weekly emails, you'll get yours at about 7:30 tonight, which is 1:30 EST. No, 2:30 EST. Just gonna stop sharing this. Where is the line between putting yourself first and being viewed as selfish?
Interesting. All selfish means is being aware of self. So it's kind of something that was generated in the Victorian days, where we used to have sayings like children should be seen and not heard. Fortunately, we've moved on a long way since then. So putting yourself first is crucial, because if you don't, you will never be in a position to help people when they need it, because you have to look after yourself to be able to look after others. A good example of that is a new mother who has got a new baby. She cannot invest all her time into that baby and not getting any sleep. You've got to first kind of look after yourself so you're there for the baby. So in my book, there is no such thing as being selfish. It's just being aware of self.
I totally agree. And I once read a study that said that the Victorians created guilt. So there you go. I love
True.
history. Okay.
Well,
so-
in transaction analysis, we don't believe that guilt is an actual true emotion, because all emotions cause a change. Guilt doesn't. You can feel guilty for 60 years about something and it will never change. So it often is used to mask other emotions that we either need to explore or to express.
There's a question from two people. I'm not sure if I've understood the drawing. And then this presentation is a win no matter what. So if someone could just explain what you mean there, and we can go through that for you. Let's see what other questions we have. Siblings brought up in the same household can have very different characters.
That's true. There's a very interesting study done in America with identical twins. And what it appears to happen is that you are given messages by your parents, and they may be consistent messages. However, it's the way the individual interprets what the message is or what is being said by that particular parent, because sometimes what the messages that are given aren't always verbal. They're what we call attributed messages. So I could have an Uncle Joe who became an alcoholic, and somebody says to me, I'm just like my Uncle Joe. But what they mean is I smile like him, my eyes are like him. But I could then interpret that and think, oh, I see, when I get older, I'm going to become an alcoholic. So it is about the way people interpret information, particularly as children. And if we've got genetic fragilities in the way that our neurological system is developed, sometimes we may be more emotionally driven, and therefore we don't always perceptive take in terms of thinking about what does this really mean.
Okay, so thank you to those who've just written up and pasted the top 10 tips. That's really sweet. It shows that you've been listening. That was your quiz. You win. You win a high five. Okay, so there's some great comments here as well. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts too. And I noticed earlier some people were sharing their thoughts on the Grey's Anatomy thing and how it makes them feel. And I think someone had also shared back in the chat box about reading a study about why we binge watch. So that's quite interesting. Has anyone got any other questions for us?
We're getting quite a few themes now that goes into what we call scripting, which is the way families deliver messages. And I can guarantee if you look at Born to Win and TA today, you will answer a lot of those questions.
They are very good books.
Jules, there's two more questions. So one was, I don't know, I haven't seen the names of the books yet in the chat, so if you could pop those in.
Yeah, I'm popping them right now for you.
Thank you. And then someone mentioned, what to do when there are really long waiting lines. Like you mentioned at the beginning, the NHS currently has a really long waiting line for therapy. Are there any other resources that you recommend or things that people can do?
I guess somebody actually put on the sort of like video conferencing, telemedicine. I'm getting a feedback, I'll have to move that. It's just difficult because particularly in the UK and here on the Isle of Man, it's no different. You are looking at 18 to 24 months to get an appointment with a psychologist. Part of that is because there is a shortage of them. The other difficulty is that a lot of mental health practitioners find it very difficult to have a longevity in that kind of career. So they retire or they become unwell and they leave. So at the moment, we are seeing more mental health nurses in the UK leaving than we can, as fast as we can train them. So it's a real difficult dilemma for services to get around. I guess the only other thing you can do is to also look in the private sector, and I know that's not always affordable, but it is something that I think we are going to struggle with for some time.
It is, like for me personally, when I've needed treatment, I ended up having like online CBT because there were just no counsellors available. This was back in London years ago. And that was, for me, that was frustrating because I just didn't gel well with that. And that's how I then discovered mindfulness and journaling. And I really think that that combined with yourself helped me. Couldn't afford private counselling at the time, and I totally understand that sometimes that's just not an option. And that's something that the World Federation for Mental Health is raising and saying, hang on a minute, our money is not going into mental health. We're not investing as much as we invest in health. We have a disparity. Some people can't afford to pay for online counselling or going for a massage or therapy and things. So I think this is something that as a community, we have to work together, promote things like World Mental Health Day, talk and be open with people. Let's try and beat down the stigmas. And over time, I think we will start to see it getting better.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that is starting to happen, and it's something we do on the Isle of Man, is we've started to run like 6-week groups. So during those 6 weeks, you would learn lots of emotional regulation skills, things like mindfulness. It's not going to cure all the difficulties, but it will make it more manageable while you're on that list waiting to see someone.
I think that leads into when we talk about positive mental health. That's the same as positive health. That's the same as I go to the gym and I eat well at least half of the time to stay healthy. It's the same with your mental health. If we practice some of these tips, your resilience might increase, you might know yourself better, you probably top up your self-care resources. So then when things do happen, you might not kind of be affected the same. Is that fair enough to say?
I think we did put it in, but it's useful on a daily basis is to do a self-check of our stress container.
Yes.
And to look, are there any solutions that could remove some of those things from our individual stress container.
There was a lot. We really struggled to narrow it down to 10.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. We really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming along. You've all got our information. Let me just paste the key links again, and I will hand over to the lovely Paola to talk you through how to leave feedback.
Thank you for all the lovely comments as well. There's lots of positive strokes.
A lot of positive strokes.
So
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you,
that.
everyone.
We're taking them.